Hello and welcome to this edition of the Federalist Files. I'm going to be going through Federalist number 4 today. And first and foremost, I want to talk about my last video. I just want to clear up some inconsistencies. I stated that in the Constitution that there was the date of November 3rd, which is not correct. There is a provision that states that the Congress has the right to establish that time and manner. That's in the Constitution, and they have established that right as the first Tuesday of November, and that is. I did put it in the video. I just want to clear that up. Anybody that's a podcast listener, I did put that quote in the video, so you did see that to correct myself. But I just want to clear that up before I start this one here. Now, Federalist number 4, you got the title is The Same Subject Continued Concerning Dangers from Foreign Force and Influence. So this is the exact same topic that John Jay is once again the author of. It's just a continuation. It was written on November 7th, 1787, and the topics here are American commerce and military unification. Now, in this paper, he starts off saying that stressing for one unified government for reasons of national security, and that's really what the overview topic is of this paper in particular. He begins with the cogent argument, and I quote, "It is too true, however disgraceful it may be to human nature, that nations in general will make war whenever they have a prospect of getting anything by it. Nay, absolute monarchs will often make war when their nations are to get nothing by it, but for the purposes and objects merely personal, such as thirst for military glory, revenge of personal affronts, ambition or private compacts to aggrandize or support their particular families or partisans." So this quote here alludes to, at that time you had a lot of monarchies. You had the British monarchy. I'm not sure if France was still a hereditary monarchy as well. So those people, when you are a monarch, a hereditary monarch like you were in Great Britain at that time, there was no election process. You were born into that position, so you really didn't have anyone to answer to. You were really independent of the people, unfortunately, and then the people would elect their version of Congress, which I don't remember what it's exactly called. The chambers of, I don't remember in particular, but they have their version of Congress, and their version of Congress has no power compared to what our American Congress has. And he cites pretended causes of war, pretty much referencing imperialism, which at the time Britain was known for. Years ago, there was not a commerce like there is today. There wasn't the same innovation. There wasn't the same amount of technology. So to get those natural resources, what other countries would do is they would take over. They would attack other nations. They would take over to gain those natural resources, or even to gain the people. The people were also a resource, because then they can sell them into slavery, or they can use them for slave labor in order to build up their resources. So authoritarian nations around the globe were known for imperialism. Nowadays, it's not really as prominent. World War II, Japan was imperialist. I mean, now Russia and China are really the only two strong foreign powers, I would say, that are still imperialist. You see issues in China right now. They are going over to they've been doing this. They've been trying to take over Hong Kong. I believe they have at this point. But Hong Kong signed a treaty with Great Britain when they gained their independence that they would be sovereign. And it was an agreement that China also agreed on, that they'd be sovereign for so many years. And that sovereignty is not ended, technically, through that treaty. But China really doesn't care, and China has taken over that district of Hong Kong. And Hong Kong was a market economy. They ran very capitalistic, just like America did. So they represent everything that America is. And China does not obviously represent those same principles. So they took them over And Hong Kong has been, it's been something that in our mainstream hasn't really been covered because, for example, The Rock, he gave his endorsement to Joe Biden because he makes a lot of his money in China. I'd like to say at least 30% of his money is made in China. It's probably even more than that with his movies because he's beloved over there, as well as a lot of our NBA athletes. I know for sure 30% of their money comes from China. So that leads you to believe we have all these NBA athletes that come out and they talk about social justice and all these other things. And right now in China, you have slave labor of they're called Uyghur Muslims. So you have people that practice the Islamic religion that live in China that have been enslaved by the communist government over there to work on Apple products, as well as other companies. A lot of other companies also ship out their, I think Nike is definitely one of them. And you have all of these people, they end up looking like hypocrites because they're talking about social justice, and then they also talk about a lot of globalist things, but then they won't mention China in particular. And they, amongst throughout the entire country, they by far exceed everybody in terms of human rights violations. So this imperialist ideology isn't anything that's new. It's been around for a long time. You'll see China and even Russia. They'll do their military demonstrations. They'll march out all these tanks or what have you. I mean, we do things that are similar, but it's not in the same magnitude that China will do. China does it too, and then they will sail their ships off our coasts or coast territories that we have. Just to kind of flex their power, let them know, hey, we're here, we have some power, we have some military industry growth going on that we want to make you guys aware of, and that is that we want to put you in some sort of fear, hey, don't mess with us kind of deal, which is the same thing. America, what we do is, and a lot of people give the president a hard time because when you go to watch a football game or even an event where he'll be speaking or any event where you want to show patriotism, they will fly, I think they're called F-150s or I don't know the name in particular, but they are these military jets. They'll fly them over the stadium, and people give them a hard time because to fly them over the stadium, there's a cost to doing that because of the type of fuel. The jet fuel is super powered. It's very expensive, and but what little do people know is most of the time when these people are flying over, these are flights that actually need to be done for training purposes in the military. So you kind of knock out two birds with one stone. So you get those Air Force pilots, their flight hours that are needed for their training, and then as well you show a little bit of patriotism and pride for country. But I'm going to get right to the next point here. Throughout this paper, Jay exudes his philosophy for the need of a unified military, and it's mostly to protect the American worker and locations within America that are rich in soil or rich in resources. He notes that America will have the ability to trade certain goods at better rates than other developed European nations. Due to this, he feared that many resentments from other nations will attempt to undermine America. In particular, he cites France and Great Britain as rivals in the fisheries, India and China in certain industries. He said they have monopolized those industries, and he said those commodities will be much more readily available and in supply in America. And because of this, he states, and I quote, "It is easy to see that jealousies and uneasinesses may gradually slide into the minds and cabinets of other nations, and that we are not to expect that they should regard our advancement in union, in power, and consequence by land and by sea with an eye of indifference and composure," end quote. So really what he's alluding to here is that these other countries are not going to be happy that we are now in the commercial business, that they at one time were doing very good exporting their goods to America, and now it seems like we're going to be exporting our goods and importing less. So you do have to have a unified military that is strong enough to fight off those encroachments from other nations that are looking to get, like he said before, they're looking to get their own personal avarice. They're looking to get anything by it, anything that they want, whether it's a personal war or like those monarchs that I mentioned earlier, or they actually have objects that they desire. So really, militaries for many things. It is to protect the American worker, the American way of life, preserve that, as well as and another thing here that he does mention is that I think he states Great Britain as well as Spain or France. But at this time, they could have tried to shut down the Mississippi River, and we really wouldn't have had any recourse except to send our militia over there, which would not have sufficed. So shutting down that main avenue of commerce would be a huge issue for us. We would not be able to export our goods even from state to state. So that would shut us down very quickly if they got into that position, which was another need for a strong, robust, federal, unified military. And another note here, exports, I've looked this up myself, but a lot of our exports include mostly lumber, tobacco, dried fish, and indigo. Indigo was to dye things, I guess, for products. I don't even know, clothes, stuff like that. He continues, and I quote, "One government can collect and avail itself of the talents and experience of the ablest men in whatever part of the Union they may be found. It can move on uniform principles of policy. It can harmonize, assimilate, and protect the several parts and members, and extend the benefit of its foresight and precautions to each." So what he's pretty much saying here in summation is, one government will be able to find and collect the most talented men, of the best war experience, smartest, most intelligent men, rather than using militias. And it will also set a uniform policy in terms of war tactics, uniforms, ROEs, which we call rules of engagement. In the United States, we had different rules of engagement. They change over time with every single administration. We had a lot of issues with the last administration with rules of engagement. If you've seen any of the American Sniper, or if you've seen The Lone Survivor, there was different ROEs. Pretty much it was to the extent that you could not fire unless if you were getting shot at. So it could be a person that you knew was a Al-Qaeda member or a ISIS member, and you were unable to engage them or even do anything about it, as in you're unable to even make an arrest or to take them into some sort of a custody, a detainment. So they had a lot of issues with stuff like that, because when you can't fire until fired upon, you're working in a reactive nature rather than a proactive nature, which you're much more likely to get killed before you can respond. So, and they also have that, what's the name of that movie? It's called the something post, the post where they put these, I believe it was an army force, they put them in the middle of Afghanistan, in just a zone that really is not defendable. They put them at the very bottom, and a lot of Afghanistan is not only a desert area, there's a lot of, it's kind of like Lebanon in a lot of ways. It's a lot of hills, foresty type nature, and they place this army force at the very bottom, and the vantage points were all at the very top of this hill, all around them, and they pretty much got attacked on all sides by Al-Qaeda, and this was during the last administration. And after that, then we put a precautionary measure stating that we cannot, you can no longer put these military personnel in positions that are undefendable. That's what they actually worded it, undefendable positions. So, those are uniform principles. They do change now with every administration, the way in which they do it, if they want to be more aggressive or if they want to be less. So, I mean, in the last administration, there was also military drone strikes in areas where there were a lot of civilian casualties because of it, because they were civilian areas. Like, you'll see this internationally in Israel about a year ago. In Israel, they were getting attacks from Hamas. Which is a Islamic terrorist group that runs the Gaza Strip. It is pretty much the quote unquote it's Palestine area, and you were seeing them shoot. They were shooting bombs, but they were shooting them from mosques, from the very roofs of mosques. So Israel, they knew Israel has their ROEs because they're smart. These people, they're not stupid in terms of military engagement. They knew that Israel had these ROEs where they were not able to engage anywhere where citizens could be, or religious buildings, so that they would fire these weapons from the mosque, and then they would have their people, they would have innocents right next to it, so they knew that Israel would not shoot back or fire back at them. So that's just a little information, kind of just going off on a tangent. But next here, he explains reasoning in terms of military action for one federal government, and I quote, "It can place the militia under one plan of discipline, and by putting their officers in a proper line of subordination to the chief magistrate will, as it were, consolidate them into one corps, and thereby render them more efficient than if divided into 13 or into 3 or 4 distinct independent companies." Or those three, or end quote. And those 3 and 4 distinct independent companies would be if there was a confederation. That's what he's mentioning there. And when he mentions militia, it is not synonymous with military personnel or like a national army. What he's really stating here is, this is actually the first, I remember I mentioned in one of my former podcasts, that I'm not sure exactly when he states the militia and he disassociates them with the military, meaning they're not the same. You know, some people that read the Second Amendment, they believe that the militia means a military. It's not the same thing as a military. He differentiates between them at multiple occasions. Well, all the writers do on multiple occasions. Jay just does it here. He pretty much says that if you have that military, that national military with uniform rules, it'll be even easier to handle the militia if any foreign enemies were to attack, because you can give that militia some sort of organizational status and ways to engage, and you can give them training through the military if it's needed, which we've never really needed to activate the militia because we have not had any domestic wars with the exception of our Revolutionary War and our Civil War. So that would be in the case of us actually somehow running out of military personnel, because let's say we have the draft. The draft only goes up to a certain age. I don't know exactly what the number is, but let's say we somehow run out and we no longer have enough people to fill the ranks. We will now start pulling from militias or pulling from people that are older of age to fight for the country. And that's pretty much what this embodies here. And at that time, they were really worried about foreign attack on domestic land. So the military would be able to set standards and procedure for these militias, and that's really what he is alluding to here. And under one chief magistrate, because everybody knows the chief magistrate is also something that's it's a statement that is interchangeably used with the President of the United States. They'll also call it the executive magistrate throughout the papers as well, just to get that out of the way. That's an interchangeable term. It's the same thing as the president. They'll go back and forth between the two. But they're the commander-in-chief of the military. They are in charge of raising the military. They pretty much have grand power when it comes to the ROEs and and a lot of the military engagements. Now, in terms of declaring war, that's something that has to go through the Congress. But if you want to do military action every single time you do military action, it is not something under the Constitution that needs to be voted on by the House of Representatives or the Senate, and that was something that was heavily contested. I think it's when I want to say when Trump pulled out of where the Kurds were. It was either that or it was when they had killed Soleimani, and I think it was Soleimani actually. And Nancy Pelosi was really giving Trump a hard time for it because he did not ask them if he could go ahead with that military action. That's really not the way it works, especially when you're fighting terrorist groups. You don't really need every single time if you want to do any type of military action. If you have to go through the red tape of the Senate and the House of Representatives, then you're going to have a serious problem, and that will quickly end our country if you have to do that every single time, because you'll never be able to act accordingly and swiftly like you should, which is actually, it will be laid out in these papers as I'll go over. That's the reason for actually having that one unified head that is the commander-in-chief as the president, is because they can quickly identify threats, and in doing so, they can act almost autonomously to an extent. But when it comes to declaring war on another nation, you're going to have to go through the Congress to do so. So he ends this paper, Jay. He ends with the characterization of the way our enemies will view us. And he states, and I quote, "If they see that our national government is efficient and well administered, our trade prudently regulated, our militia properly organized and disciplined, our resources and finances discreetly managed, our credit reestablished, our people free, contented, and united, they will be much more disposed to cultivate our friendship than provoke our resentment." End quote. So, in other words, he's really just pointing to if our national government's efficient, well administered, we have all of what we really need in terms of our finances and our resources, like our money. We have a strong military that is well trained, and our trade is on point, and our commerce is very robust. He's just signifying that these other countries are not going to resent us. They're going to try to form relationships with us and friendships, and that is true. If we're small and we're weak and we have and that was the reason really for the Constitution, was to establish, one of the biggest things was to establish the avenues for commerce and to establish that military, as well as the ability to legislate and actually change laws and rules and collect that revenue. Collecting the revenue is a very huge part, and when I mean revenue, I mean taxation. And I don't mean taxation like today's taxation, where you're looking at like, once you pay your state, if you live in New Jersey, once you pay your state and federal tax, you're paying at least 30%. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about that kind of taxation. I'm talking about small taxation. They refer to duties on exports and or imports, not exports. I apologize for imports. Maybe even exports. I'm not exactly sure of that. But essentially what they were was just tariffs. Kind of like if you hear the whole tariff war that we had with China a while ago, if we're still having it, I think we are. It's just tariffs on anything that's imported into the country. They talked about consumption tax, and that consumption tax is the same as a sales tax. Those were the two that they mostly talk about. Then they do talk briefly about a property tax, but these were taxes, if you look throughout the history of the United States, at one point in the Constitution originally, there is supposed to be no such thing as an income tax, according to the Constitution. And then throughout time, they found it unconstitutional when they tried to enact one, I think in the early 1900s. And then they had to override that, and they had to add a constitutional amendment just to make income tax, viable again. But if you look throughout history, in our early history, the taxation was nowhere near what it's at now. So, but essentially what he's really just alluding to here is that the national government needs to have those revenues coming in. We need to be powerful. Our people need to be independent, free, but also unified. And that will be, that's how we'll keep all of those enemies at bay. And if you like the content, like, share, subscribe. This will be coming out Monday night. It's going to be coming out. And drop the mic on anybody that you know. Let them know, hey, Mike D'Amato's got a podcast, check it out. It's very informational, it's educational, because currently I am unable to get any type of advertising going on Facebook to my audience and my directed audience. So please like, share, subscribe, and make sure you drop the mic. Thank you, and I will see everyone on Wednesday.